Is this happening? Oh, okay, there it is. It's live. Welcome everybody to the first guest episode of Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment. This is the new revamped the podcast, and I'm your host. My name is Ali Rizvi. I'm the author of The Atheist Muslim: A Journey from Religion to Reason, and with me is Armin Navabi. He's the Iranian ex-Muslim founder of Atheist Republic, which is the largest online platform for atheists worldwide with over 1.7 million members. He's also the author of Why There Is No God. So hi, Armin. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
Yeah. And welcome. And what we're going to do is we're going to get right to it. So we're really, really honored today to speak to the first guest on this podcast, which is Sarah Haider. Sarah Haider is the co-founder of Ex-Muslims of North America, which I think most of you listening to this have probably heard of, and you've probably heard of her too. So hi, Sarah. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, me too.
This is so exciting. I've been waiting for this episode for a long time.
No, this is great. So it has been, and so what I wanted to kind of start with, and this is sort of the theme of what we want to talk about a lot this year, is that last year, 2017. Well, let me start with less than 30 years ago, we had Salman Rushdie, and we had his whole fatwa, with his he was sentenced to death by Khomeini, and he had to go into hiding underground. And then last year, I saw conferences. I had there are books out on the same kind of topic that are blasphemous to Islam. There were riots over cartoons as little as 11 years ago. 2 years ago you had Charlie Hebdo, and the attack there. Now they're all over the internet. They're everywhere online. There are thousands and thousands of ex-Muslims, former Muslims, secular Muslims, just out there talking openly, um, showing who they are, walking freely, and having open dialogue. Especially here in the West. I mean, I don't want to downplay it and say that it's like that. I mean, there's still a huge amount of risk everywhere. But last year we had we had the Muslimish conference, we had the ex-Muslim conference with Mariam Namazi in London, we had this podcast, we had XMNA and their tour, right? You guys started the Normalizing Dissent tour. So how are you feeling about this? You guys started how many years ago?
3-4 years ago, like somewhere around there. We're a relatively young organization, but I feel like we've grown. I mean, feels like it was yesterday when we started because of how quickly things have progressed, and there's never been like a moment's rest. But it's wonderful to see all these activists, coming up and talking about their experiences. And what we want to do with ex-Muslims in North America is to try and give them that platform as often as we possibly can, because you see with Muslims or any other organized group that actually has some real political power. You see that they have institutions, and the institutions are able to hoist up those that show promise and show talent, and give them the resources that anybody that aspires to have kind of a stage or maybe a voice in something, and gives them those resources. You see this with Linda Sarsour, right? And she's dependent on some extent to the organizations that she's affiliated with, because they've given her that platform. And there are things that organizations can do, that institutions can do, that for an individual to accomplish on their own is very difficult. So I think what we need to do with ex-Muslims is build those organizations, build those institutions. And that's what we've been focused on, especially this last in 2017 and 16, these last 2 years, where we've really gotten our feet, just gotten everything together a little bit. We started the Life Beyond Faith videos. And I don't know how many of your listeners are aware of them, but you can, you go to our YouTube channel, Ex-Muslim North America YouTube channel, and we have the videos there. And the whole idea was, I wanted to capture ex-Muslims who are not activists, not well-known people, and just talk about their experiences and share their story.
Yeah, their personal stories. It's actually really moving. I've seen many of them, and I actually learned about I think Obaid and some of these other guys.
Obaid and Gada is all around too, and she's speaking a lot. So there's a couple of people who have now become a lot more active due to the videos. And the idea was, if you're an activist, you're somebody who nobody knows. You're trying to get your name out there, get your ideas out there. People might not take you seriously, but if you can say, hey, look, here's this organization who covered me, and here's this video that they had, and if you see the video and it looks like it's a high quality video, the idea goes that these people who are seeing it say, okay, well, this person must be worth something. It might be, there's a reason they were covered. So let's give them a chance, and let's So we've been focusing on that for the last 2 years.
That's a really good point, because one thing that happened is, for the longest time, and Armin, I think I've talked to you about this before, is that all the stuff that I used to do, I just used to annoy people around me and my family and everybody. I'm talking like 12, 13 years ago. And then I started writing about it. And once the article showed up in a sort of a professional looking format online, some people in my family were like, oh, wow, he's a writer. And I was saying the same shit that I'd been saying to them that annoyed the crap out of them. And then when my book came out, the day my book came out, my mom, who'd always been saying, you're a little too hard on it, you have to be more respectful. She said, congratulations, your book's out. It'll do well. And then she said, it'll do well, inshallah. I'm like, that was a blurb. Like that should have gone on the book cover. But
that's funny.
It's true. Yeah, when you see things that are done in a way that is sort of publicly recognizable and accessible, it is very powerful for individual people. That's why I think what you guys do with the videos.
That's really funny, because my mom prayed to God that Atheist Republic becomes successful.
See, there you go. There's something's happening. I don't know what's happening, but something.
But one thing about ex-Muslims of North America that doesn't get enough attention. I mean, these more recent Life Beyond Faith videos are what people see. The normalizing dissent is what people see. But a lot of the work that people don't notice because they're not supposed to notice is the work that goes into connecting ex-Muslims in cities in North America together and building a community. And I think most people don't understand how valuable that is and how much work goes into what you guys do to create a safe environment for ex-Muslims, because it was suggested to us that we do something like that, and I was like, nobody can do something like that.
Well, it's absurd. The amount of time suck is just absurd. And if you took a look at the volunteer, if you added the volunteer hours and staff time together that X70 spends on anything, then the building the communities takes up just an absurd amount of it. And it's something that most people don't even know that we do. No. And they don't see the value of it because they don't actually interact with the communities, and we're all we're underground. Right. It's only something that ex-Muslims can take a part in. So it's something that people don't see, but it is something that I think is perhaps the most valuable aspect of what we do. Because if you take a look at the Life Beyond Faith series, every one of those people are people that I know of because of the communities. Otherwise, I would have never heard of them, because they're not people who said that I want to be an activist necessarily.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah. So it's part of the communities is that I see these people that were, just, they had no interest in activism. They had no interest in being more outspoken. And then they meet others like them. And then they hear stories that are similar to theirs. And they think, oh, well, you know what? I can do it. I can take this step and I can speak out a little bit. And if ex-Muslims in North America can give them a platform, then that's wonderful. We have more faces out there. I think it's one of those things, like when it comes to understanding something as a movement, people see things in the way a toddler sees things. With kids, they see like one, and they count 1 and 2 and 3, and then it's just like many, right? Like in their heads, right? There's a few, and then there's just many, because they can't count that far. And I think when it comes to movement, it's similar. So if it's Ayan and Maryam Namazi and that's it, then it's just a few people. But if it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12, then it's a movement, right? They don't see it as now 12 individuals. They see it as a movement. They see it as an ideological thing to that they need to address, rather than a few people who are misguided and leading others astray.
But one thing other than that, a valuable thing that I had no appreciation for, because I thought you live in Canada, so this is a free country, you get to say whatever you want, is that unlike Sarah, unlike Ali, and like myself, there's a lot of ex-Muslims here, even in North America, that can't yet come out as ex-Muslims. And when I went to the Vancouver, by the way, one thing that Ali, you should have mentioned in the intro, I'm a proud member of ex-Muslim of North America as well, and I go to as many meetings as I possibly can.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah, so when I go to these meetings, most of these people, we're the only people that know that they're ex-Muslims. Their family doesn't know, their friends don't, nobody knows, and this is their only outlet. And this, for I can't even imagine how many people are out there that are now have a community, now have an outlet that they could tell people who they are because of ex-Muslim of North America, because of the hours that went into screening people and creating a safe environment for people to find other ex-Muslims in their city.
And I gotta tell you,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay. No, I was just gonna say, whenever I started this, barely I knew there were other people. There would be almost every sort of, even family gatherings and stuff I'd go to, there'd always be somebody who'd come and they'd talk and they'd just very quietly say it, and they'd sometimes reach out, but it was very rare to find anybody who would speak about it openly. And now I meet people all the time who are just completely public with it. And you ask them, there was a time you'd ask them, do your parents know? And they'd be like, no, there's no way they can know. But now when I talk to them, they're like, well, yeah, they have an idea. They know I don't pray, and
things are changing. Absolutely,
it is, and it's been in such a short time. And I think just organizations like XMNA and like they've done a lot to do it. Another example I wanted to give was one thing that a lot of people on my feed, especially relatives and stuff, who are not involved with this stuff, they're sort of religious or liberally religious, was the video that you did on Sayyid Rizvi. Sayyid Rizvi, this guy in his 60s, so he had the same.
No, in his 60s. No.
Oh, how old is? Oh,
he's like 83, 84.
Oh, okay. Well, he looks a lot younger.
He looks younger, but he's in his 80s.
That's amazing. So if you leave Islam, you're gonna look a lot younger than you are when you're older. That's a lesson. But so not only did you share the same name as me, a lot of my relatives saw it, and then they're like, wow, this guy's like my dad. He's like my grandfather, and he's totally cool with it. He's doing this, and it somehow gives it a because the biggest thing that's kind of holding them back is their elders and the whole cultural thing. And so when they see that, that's really powerful too. And that's something I never saw. I don't think a lot of people saw before those videos came out. So, but so in addition to the videos, you also now have.
But can we get into the questions now? Because
sure. Yeah.
Because so a reason on Faith in the live chat is asking. I've seen ex-Muslims coming out with aliases, but I suspect that if one ever wanted to speak publicly, such as writing for a large newspaper, you would have to use your real name. Yeah, obviously, I guess, right?
What's the question?
So I guess
no, newspapers do use aliases, but usually they you have to declare that it's an alias.
All right. So my question that was from the live chat. My question though is, you guys have done a very amazing job at creating a community for ex-Muslims. But one thing I was wondering if you guys are going to move into in the future is reaching out to Muslims and advocating for leaving Islam, like actually like telling people, giving reasons, actually encouraging people to leave Islam. Is that something that you guys consider ever doing?
Well, it would be something I think we would like to do in like the dream scenario where we are able to handle what we already have on our plate. And at the moment, the problem of just providing enough resources for ex-Muslims and enough platforms for ex-Muslims is a very big one. So I think if we grow enough, certainly that's the next. That's somewhere we'd like to go, or at least start to engage in those conversations. I don't know if necessarily we'd want to proselytize, because that's not the mission of the organization necessarily. But as an individual activist, that's certainly somewhere I would like to go.
I don't like the word when you say proselytize. It seems like it's negative. I think everybody.
No,
has,
I mean, in the sense that we are there to support the people who are they've already reached a certain conclusion. So within our communities, like we don't let people who are confused or who don't know and they're just trying to figure it out. We say, okay, not yet. All right, when you know, you come to us.
Right.
But otherwise, that's not really like helping people through their journeys is not necessarily something that we're capable of handling or particularly interested in handling at the moment. Right. I do see that as something that might change if we were to have just more resources out there.
Right. I mean, a lot of people tell atheists that you're advocating for atheism. You're basically the same as religious people, like Christians and Muslims evangelizing. And I tell them I don't see any problem with Christians advocating for Christianity and Muslims advocating for it. Everybody should go out and advocate for ideas, and the best ideas win. That's not the part of religion we have a problem with.
But Armin, I have just a question. When you talk about talking to people and trying to get Muslims to leave Islam, I mean, there's a. Do you mean actively going out and trying to convince them, or because a lot of times that happens when you have things like this tour, or the college campus tour, or when people hear a debate, or when you have a debate with them, like you have had many debates with Muslims where you just talk about things that are
right. Right. Like so for example, maybe in the future they would have a tour with debates with Muslims, right? Or like they would have not groups where it's not so heavily screened, where people know that and Muslims are invited and ex-Muslims that are out are invited, for them to have like a meaningful discussions and like non-alcoholic drinks and sit there and talk.
I'm not joining.
No, but I mean, like, it would be, I mean, maybe in the future, but if that's something, I mean, you're the main ex-Muslim brand out there in North America. So if there's any group that is going to push for advocating people leaving Islam, I think I would like to see, I would love to see you guys move into that direction.
So there is something to be said though. And I agree with you that, you know, on the horizon, that's best case scenario, that is somewhere we might be interested in going. But I think that just by mere one existence, and two, by voicing the problems that we've had with faith, we already are participating in that, you know, proselytizing process. Even if we're not doing it directly, we're doing it indirectly. But I know for a fact that it's influenced people because we screen people. So, right. So people come in and they'll be like, oh, well, I saw this video and that's what got me to question. So I know that the mere existence and acknowledgement of the issues that we see has been enough to move some people out of the faith. But as far as doing it in a more direct sense, but I agree that it's something that needs to be done.
I think that appeals to a lot of people with emotionally appeals to them, right? But I think a lot of Muslims, they want the intellectual debates, discussions, like different kind of Muslim. And this is not good forcing people. There are a lot of Muslims that are actually hoping that somebody comes and debates them. And you have a really great asset on your team, with Muhammad Sayed would be a great person to debate against. Like you have Muslim and Muhammad Sayed, against each other. That would be an amazing ex-Muslim.
So, I was listening to something. I think the Majid Nawaz interview that you had in the previous version of this podcast, and I was wishing that I would like Muhammad Sayed to talk to Majid, because there was a lot of places where I know that they would have clashes, and Muhammad is so educated on like the intricacies of like the verses and the context that there would be just a very direct debate there that I would love to see happen. And if you guys can make it happen, that would be great.
Yeah. What are your views on the reform movement, actually?
I'm not a reformist. I don't consider.
I don't like that. What are your thoughts on it? I
don't think. none of us.
Yeah, none of. I think we'd share the similar views, which is to say that I think it is something that people want to be true. It is something that people hope can happen, because it seems like the most likely thing. If you view religion as just like a set of practices that people can abandon one by one, and then reach this some mildly secular place. But I think that's not the way that most Muslims view religion. And I think most Muslims view religion as a truth claim. Like they really think this is the 100% true way of looking at the world. And when intellectually drop one, it follows that the rest must be dropped as well. It follows that none of it is real. And I think that's something that's hard for people that grew up in the West to understand, because they've never been raised with a religion like that. I mean, obviously, there are conservative Christians and Jews who have been raised in that way, but the vast majority of people who call themselves religious do not understand religion as that like all-encompassing way of seeing the world, the way that I think Muslims do.
But
I wanted to say, sorry, Armin, I just wanted to make one point in terms of the title of this pod. One of the reasons that we call this the Enlightenment is because I think that I'd like that term to take hold, especially when it comes to the Muslim and ex-Muslim communities, because there's a direct analog historically to the Western or the Christian Enlightenment, and that's something that people recognize, so they can draw an analog. And the second thing is what another sort of precedent that there was is like when they talk about reinterpreting scripture but maintaining the claim that it's infallible. I don't think that's effective at all. That's useless.
Yeah.
It actually it almost makes a person look dumb when you're trying to say that, no, actually, kill your wife means kiss your wife, or it doesn't make any sense. But when you actually, if reform had this idea of proposing that the scripture is not infallible, if they were just getting rid of the idea of infallibility, then that is sort of like a baby step approach that I think would make a lot more sense.
If it's fallible, it's useless, right?
Yeah.
If it can be wrong, it's useless as scripture. The whole point of scripture is that it's the truth.
And
exactly. If you cannot rely on it as an authority, then I mean, and I understand, because I read some of the arguments. I'm so interested in like Galileo and the whole thing that happened with the church, and there's all these interesting letters that went on during the day when he discovered through the use of his telescope. And he's actually like, what a lot of people don't understand about him. I'm sorry to derail this, but I'm like a big geek about this.
No, this is very relevant. So
he was a very technically proficient kind of guy, and he invented a telescope that could see certain things, that could see some stars and things clearer than could other, like he was mechanically proficient, right? So he invented a tool that could see certain things, and using that instrument, he found that, okay, well, maybe maybe this whole idea that the sun goes around the earth is not correct. And it's so interesting to see the back and forth that he had with there's this letter to the Duchess Christina, which he wrote 1630 something, I don't know, but he wrote this letter to her and describing to her what his findings and how truly that this is why this should be accepted by someone like her. And it's fascinating to see them grapple with this same problem, which is that actually here's something that the Bible says which isn't literally true, but how can we accept this thing? How can we accept the fact that the Bible wasn't literally true here and still maintain belief in the faith altogether?
That's the emotion. That's the emotional struggle, and I think one of the things, like if the reform thing, if they started the reform movement, started moving more towards just rejecting the idea that this is infallible, then what people could do is they could, and this has happened in Christianity in the past, is what they could do is they can say, okay, they can actually cherry pick. They can say, okay, all this stuff in the Quran is bullshit, but I like the concept of zakah. Like I like the concept of like giving to the poor, and so I want to keep that. Or I like this cultural holiday of Eid. I want to keep. So I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that is something that I'm not saying that's something that would happen across the board. And I'm saying that there's some people who may be more inclined to at least want to keep something in, but have a way out, right? So,
well, Sarah. So based on your own argument, I'm gonna try to play the devil's advocate and argue for reform. What, like, if like Galileo, if he went and said, okay, so this is not true, this is not the Bible got it wrong, so but if he went and told everybody, well, God is not real, but the Christianity is all bullshit, this whole faith is, you can't use faith to figure out what is true or not, that would have a he would have a very hard sell to make, right? Why can't he just if he went and said, you know what, this is what I understand, this is how our solar system works, but I'm not making any claims about the Bible or Christianity, wouldn't him just saying throw the whole thing out hurt his cause? And wouldn't the reformers have a case then to say just go one by one instead of just throwing the whole thing away? That's not going to be effective. This is what the reform movement is suggesting, that just take the parts that don't make sense, remove those, keep the rest, you know.
Sure. Well, here's what I would argue to that. What didn't win in that scenario was that Galileo necessarily managed to convince them that it was acceptable to hold that position and still be a Christian. I don't think that's what won in that case. What won with the whole Galileo affair was the fact that the truth is unrelenting, and that the church could not deny it any longer. There's a certain period of time where they could deny it, and then the mechanics of telescopes and everything, like, they got good enough that they couldn't deny it, even if they wanted to deny it. So it wasn't something that they were persuaded into believing. It was something that was almost coerced out of them, because, I mean, Hannah Arendt has talked about this a little bit. It's just this like wonderful idea from her that I've adopted recently, which was, she said that there's a coercive aspect to truth. There's, it's there. There's nothing you can do about it. You can lie to yourself if you want, but can you believe your own lies? Huh?
It's helpless. Once you.
The truth is the truth. The truth is the truth. You can't, so it's not necessarily that both things were equally likely and Galileo convinced them of one way. It's that the truth was always there, and it was always encroaching on the church's view of reality, and continued to encroach until they had no choice. And you see this throughout the Catholic Church, where they had to give up step by step by step just a variety of different doctrines, because it became impossible to deny it any longer. But it wasn't something that I think they were persuaded into doing, where they really felt like it was the right thing to do necessarily, but it was something that they just couldn't lie about any longer. They couldn't deny the truth any longer. It was impossible for them to do it and still exist as an institution. So I don't think, from a reform perspective, if we're really depending on persuasion, I don't know if necessarily that'll be the case. The most persuasive thing is the truth. And in some senses, it's a coercive thing, because it's hard to deny when what's there is there, right? And
so bringing back your analogy to the reform, you're suggesting that what the reform movement is trying to do is to persuade people to accept a different version of Islam, but what actually works is to just encourage people to find the truth. And if you give people the tools to find the truth, they are forced to accept some things are fact and some things as bullshit.
Right. I mean, I've talked to so many, like, literally at this point, because of the screening thing that we do with ex-Muslims in North America, so many ex-Muslims, and I've heard personally their different stories. And there are very few people who were excited about the prospect of becoming an ex-Muslim. Right, who was just like, oh yeah, I'm ready to be in a positive. This is a wonderful step. This is where I want to be. We were disturbed every step of the way, and usually the choice to acknowledge, okay, well, I'm not really Muslim anymore, is a devastating one, is a difficult one. It's not an easy one that you're just joyful in making. You don't want to make it. It's something you almost feel forced to make, because you see yourself as a rational person, and here is reality, and you must confront it and you must accept it. Otherwise, you can no longer think of yourself as this rational person. And I think there are some Muslim, like, apologist types who have chosen to make a different decision there.
Yeah, actually, to your point, when I was losing my faith, I was crying and I was begging God to show himself, send me a sign or anything. I was scared of because he was my only friend, and I was really terrified about the conclusions, that the direction my conclusions were taking me, and I was begging him to save me. So yeah, it was very uncomfortable. You're right about that.
Yeah, there is a phase you go through when you're just like, okay, just give me something, give me some sign, because you're losing so much. I think a lot of many people don't realize this, but you just simply changing your mind and realizing that you don't think a certain way and being compelled by the truth, as you say, just that can actually mean, okay, I'm never going to see my family again.
Mm-hmm.
My brother's never going to talk to me again, or I'm never going to be able to go back, or in my case, to the country where I grew up and check out my school and my neighborhood. Where I
Mm-hmm.
grew
You
up.
weren't a true Muslim. My concern was burning forever.
Mm.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah, I know. So for me, like the
family.
thing is, I never fully bought the burning forever thing. I always thought that was a metaphor, but I came from a very sort of
Well,
I wouldn't say hippie.
I stopped believing in the burning forever thing. Like when I lost my faith, I also lost the idea that I would burn forever. But then the fear was losing my family and losing relations with the people that I cared about.
That's what it was. That's what I think it is for a lot of people. Just your memories of childhood, a lot of things that are associated with it. Um, that really is a loss. But I wanted to follow up on something Armin was saying about when you're talking about the truth, you just have to accept it. So now what you have is you still do have a situation where there are a lot of people who are believing Christians, but they think evolution is compatible. That includes people like Francis Collins, right? Who is, who's the director of the NIH, who's the head of, the Human Genome Project. So he's a brilliant guy. I've actually heard him speak. And he's as brilliant as anybody, but he's a believing Christian and he thinks evolution is compatible, which it obviously isn't. But you also have that. So they take these elements of the truth. They're convinced by Galileo. They're convinced by Darwin, but it suddenly becomes, even the Catholic Church is like, oh, okay, now evolution is probably okay. So it does become a part that I think is another level of it, where people still hold on to it. They still want to keep one foot in. So I it doesn't make sense to me, but I think that it is a gradual process. I feel like it's more of a process. And to some people, I've noticed that when it comes to Islam, especially, the moderates and I guess what Phil Zuckerman calls a mild apostates, the people who come from sort of moderate to liberal backgrounds, and then they leave, they tend to be they want to adopt like a hippie version, or that they're more prone to that whole for keeping certain elements of it intact. Whereas the really fundamentalist ones, the people who come from very fundamentalist backgrounds, like Yaz Muhammad, like even Armin, the way that he was, when they leave, they want nothing to do with it. Like they just like, especially people from Salafi backgrounds, I've noticed that they just do a complete turn. They become very hardcore atheists from hardcore Muslims. So that's also kind of an interesting thing how that happens. But have you seen that or have you had a different experience with all of the ex-Muslims that you've spoken to?
Well, I know I would agree with some of that in the sense that there is a sense of like there are people who can afford to be romantic. Do you know what I mean? That's how I phrase it. It's not that necessarily
it's a privilege.
This reflects to it's a privilege. It's a privilege to be able to get to the point where you can see, oh well, the way that the Farid Zakaria kind of Islam, which is to say that he's not a Muslim, right? In any real in a way that other Muslims would define being a Muslim, he is not a Muslim.
He said
right?
he said that he doesn't believe, so
but he calls himself he calls
himself Muslim.
He still enjoys that label. I think to some extent those of us, and I can actually count myself among this number, that can afford to do this. I see it myself as some of a privileged ex-Muslim, and that's I think why I have a duty to speak out, and I think privileged ex-Muslims have a duty to speak out. But I noticed it's that with those who don't grow up in that kind of extreme background, it's easier to adopt this romantic view, and it feels good. That's what I think really matters here, is that it feels good for them to be able to say it. And we have to discourage people from doing the thing, doing any kind of thing just because it feels good, just because it's something that their emotions are saying, well, I feel tied down to this for XYZ reasons. You have to be able to reason yourself out of that, because it's very easy to commit horrors. It's very easy to even justify the most disgusting atrocities if your emotions are tied down to denying that there are atrocities in the first place. So I think that there's I agree with you with your differentiation that it depends a little bit on how you grew up and how seriously you took the faith. but I would say that despite growing up somewhat liberally, I did take the faith seriously in a way that I don't know if Muslims that grew up in the way that I did necessarily do. So I think that there's a personal aspect to it a little bit, where it's like a personality kind of thing. Like, are you the kind of person who would say, okay, if I believe XYZ, I'm going to actually do XYZ? That's not necessarily everyone.
I was like
right?
that.
That was me.
If I think something, I want to live it that way.
Right,
Too. I don't want to be.
So yeah.
Which is probably why we're atheists too now.
Right. Well, that is definitely why we're atheists.
I almost died because of that commitment.
Yeah.
But before I ask my next question, Obaid is actually in the live chat. He wanted to say thanks, Sarah, for making the Life Beyond Faith videos and bringing in voices of ex-Muslims who wouldn't have spoken out otherwise, and that doing my video made me want to speak out more. So that's Obaid in the live chat right now.
Yay! That's exactly what we were hoping for, and I'm so glad that Obaid agreed to speak out and agreed to be a part of it. I think it was an awesome video, and it helped a lot of people, which is amazing.
Yeah, go watch it. Actually, let's link to it in the description of this video so people could go watch it. But I wanted to ask, when you came to Vancouver, remember I asked Sam Harris when he was giving his speak, I kind of challenged him on whether he's against the word atheist because this makes people tribal, and some people saying that using that word creates like identity politics and stuff. And I was wondering if anybody has ever asked you by using the word ex-Muslim, do you think that identifying as ex-Muslims is playing into the identity politics? Do you think by creating groups of ex-Muslims we're going to become tribal? Do you think by constantly mentioning the fact that we are oppressed and people discriminate against ex-Muslims, do you think that we're playing into victimhood culture? All these things that we accuse of the regressive left of, or do you think we're guilty of that?
That was like 10 questions.
All right, so actually it's 3.
Okay, all right.
Let me summarize it just so is using are we playing identity politics? Are we going to become tribal by creating ex-Muslim communities? And are we playing using victimhood culture by reminding people that that we are oppressed all the time? We're constantly telling people ex-Muslims are discriminated against. 13 countries want to kill us. Yeah.
So I have a view on identity politics that I don't know if everybody shares, which is to say that I think that this is a word and it's used by a variety of different groups in a way that isn't helpful, and it doesn't really describe a phenomena in the way that it is helpful. I will describe it in the way that makes sense to me, which is that I see identity politics, that is to say that collectively organizing around a feature of yourself as something that can be both positive or negative depending on what that feature is, and then depending on what you think this feature should grant you. That is to say that if you were in the civil rights era, for example, there's a lot of people who will say that was identity politics in one way or another. That Black people in America gathered together and they talked about Black issues and they pushed for change. That was for change to better Black communities and to make it easier for them as citizens to participate in society. And many people would define that as something that is identity politics. And I would, in a broad sense, I would agree that is true, that is a form of identity politics. It's a kind of positive identity politics in the sense that they gathered around a trait that they shared and they talked about an injustice. Their overall goal was one of equality. They were pointing out, okay, well, here are ways that people like us are facing injustice, and we shouldn't be facing injustice. And they were referencing universalist values. They were saying we are all equal, and we all deserve, equality under the law, and we all deserve equal treatment, and we are not getting it, right? So in that sense, it's walking towards justice, and in that sense, if you that's how you're going to identify. If that's what you're going to call identity politics, then I would consider that as positive identity politics. But what you see, I think, more often on the left, and this doesn't directly answer your question, I think, but I think these are identity politics which I would consider negative, are identity politics, which claim that there are certain groups of people who have access to knowledge that no one else can ever touch, right? And you see this with you see this played out on just absurd social media discussions, where people will say, "Well, you're a white guy." You know, I think Linda Sarsour had this kind of similar encounter where some white guy talked to her about she was giving a speech and he said, "Well, you said XYZ," and she said to him, "Well, first of all, you're a white guy telling me, you know," and this is a reference to a kind of identity politics that is extremely harmful, because what it's saying is that me as a brown woman, I have access to a kind of knowledge that you as a white man never have access to. You will never be able to access, which is why if people like Sam Harris have difficulty talking about, if I said the exact same thing Sam Harris said, I would face less backlash than he did. And there are lots of people who wouldn't come after me in the same way that they would come after him, because him as a white guy to say those same things means something different than me as a brown woman to say something. And what this, I think, underscores is this ideology that says that, well, if depending on how you're born, depending on how you're identifying, you actually have access to different kinds of knowledge. Am I making sense there, or am I just ranting?
Yeah,
no, that makes a lot of sense.
Actually, I think we're all aligned on that, and I know we've talked about this before as well. Is that when you start saying that, you know, on the basis of because of their experience, some people don't have access to certain kinds of knowledge and they can't, then you make discussion impossible. You make advocacy impossible. Rational discourse becomes impossible, and the only place that leads to more identity politics,
right,
because now it's not about ideas anymore.
It's more progressive discourse becomes impossible, because the whole idea of getting to a progressive society is us persuading each other that this is the right course to take. But if you say, well, you as, you know, a brown man or a black man or a white man can never reach this conclusion on your, you can never access the knowledge on your own, you must just bow down and listen to me, then we're never going to be able to get to that progressive place where we all are persuaded by the same thing together. Instead, it's kind of a weird domination thing, right? It's this one group has this access to knowledge nobody else has. I think this idea of experience, which is important, of course. Like I know that I have a certain experience as a woman, as a brown woman too, and I was raised in Texas. Again, I wasn't raised in some like super liberal like place. I was raised in Texas, and I have certain experiences that I know that my male white friends don't have. But that doesn't mean that they're unable to understand what it feels like to go through this, that they're unable to understand how it affected me, that they're unable to understand the injustice of it if persuaded, right? And that the progressive politics has depended on the majority having the ability to be convinced by the right thing and actually do some things that are not necessarily in their interests and move forward towards a more progressive society.
Yeah,
so
very well said. Yeah.
That's a very good explanation of it. The way let me know if you agree with this. The way I think about it is that if your identity is being used to target you, then you can use your identity to ask for protection, right? So if you're a Jew under Nazi Germany, if you're a Yazidi under ISIS, if you're a Christian in Egypt, right? If you're a gay person in Iran, then if your identity is a target sign on your back, then you could use that identity to ask other people that don't see eye to eye with the people that are targeting you, like, this is my identity, please help me, right? They're using this identity. That's where your identity is actually unique. Not, it makes strategic sense to tell people if you're a Yazidi and ISIS coming, the fact that you're Yazidi makes a big difference to me. I want to help you more than other people. If you're a Sunni Muslim, I'm going to grab you and put you in the helicopter, and maybe not the Sunni Muslim, right? So your identity really matters at that point. Or if you're a Jew in Germany, then I'm going to hide you in my in my basement, but not if you're a white guy, right? I mean,
yeah, and the same thing goes like black men who are stopped by cops or who are shot by cops, or women who are sexually harassed, who people just didn't believe them for many years, and now so that their identity actually forms it's sort of the nexus around which their experience was built, and to be able to communicate that. But that's the thing. Like if you to your point, Sarah, if you start shutting other people out and start saying, well, you can't understand this because I went to this and you didn't. I'm like, I'm trying to understand, help me understand so I can be an ally. Um, so what happens? You can actually shut out allies, and you can alienate people, and you can sort of almost ghettoize a society even worse.
But yeah, but that's what I was getting to. What Sarah's the negative use of identity politics is when you try to use your identity to claim any kind of superiority, whether if that's in rights or in understanding of anything, right? So that's I think the way the negative use of it. But what about the now using these identities, using these labels, ex-Muslim, atheist, as Sam mentioned, the reason why he might not like using the word atheist is that it creates tribalism. Are you afraid of ex-Muslims becoming tribal in their own groups? I mean, I think we might be far away from that, but is that a concern at all?
No, I see it all the time already. Like, oh wait, ex-Muslims? No, I was saying about atheists in general. Like atheists in general, there's a lot of tribalism that happens.
Well, I have a way to fight tribalism within atheist communities, but I was wondering if that's a concern with ex-Muslim communities at all yet.
I don't, I wouldn't say so. And I don't know if it's ever, I guess maybe I would disagree with you a little bit, Ali, in the sense of atheism, because what I've found is that there is something about the two dominant tribes, which is to say that the left and the right are tribes that don't accept all of atheist claims, either of them, right? And we've all I'm sure on this podcast and in previous version of this podcast, you guys must have discussed in depth, which is that there are aspects of being an ex-Muslim that is not accepted by either side. Yeah. And I think that is true of atheists in general, because atheists were the first to say that Islam is, why maybe we're not cool with Islam, like maybe because they were logically consistent. They were saying, well, if we're going to say that Christians are wrong for XYZ and Jews are wrong for XYZ, of course all this applies to Muslims. And that's when we saw the first real backlash against atheism, was when then they started to address Islam. And I think most people recognize this, that's when this first happened. What the way that I interpret it is that atheists failed, at least those new atheists failed to follow the dictates of their tribe, which is to say leftists. Like they failed to follow that line directly. They said, okay, well, no, we disagree with this one point, and in fact we're going to go in the other direction. And so I think to the extent that we are going to be ideologically consistent as atheists, or as any one particular thing, it's hard to be tribal if you're looking at modern political sides. I mean, there's nothing about leftists that are truly ideologically consistent, and nothing about those on the rights that are actually ideologically consistent.
I think maybe when it comes to it's not as much, I wouldn't say, probably maybe tribalism is the wrong word. I do think and I think this is a positive thing. I think the moment you start having a little bit of factioning and a little bit of sectarianism, even for lack of a better word, that shows that a movement's gotten big. That shows that there's diversity of thought within the movement. And everybody isn't thinking the same. And I think that it's, in a way, it's the opposite of tribalism. And you have atheists who come from the communist side. You have other atheists who are Ayn Rand atheists, and they're completely different. They both reject religion for completely different reasons, but there are elements to it, and I think that they can sort of talk to each other as well, and I think that it can be productive. And it's good to have ideological diversity.
The gay rights movement was very successful in North America, and they don't. There's nothing I don't think that they have in common other than people in the gay rights movement, other than the fact that they think that they should be treated the same as others, right? I mean, I don't think the gay rights movement became tribalistic. It never ended up turning into something that they said that they're better than other people, right? It was very successful. They got together. They managed to get. They have still a lot of work to do, but they managed to get a lot of rights. They managed to point out to a lot of discrimination against them, and won many battles. And we are not afraid of that becoming a tribal. So I don't understand the fear of the atheist movement ever becoming, or the ex-Muslim movement becoming very tribal.
I will say there's a distinction there in the sense that I borrow from the gay rights terminology quite a bit, and all ex-Muslims do, I think, out of the closet, being in the closet, like that's a common thing that we use. And we actually, part of Life Beyond Faith, like when we did those videos, the idea was to say, oh, the sex Muslim could be neighbor, your brother, your sister, you know, and that was the idea was borrowed from some of the strategies that the gay rights movement used successfully in the past in the United States, and truly, like, to great success if you look at where they are now versus where they were 20 years ago. Having said that, I think this goes back a little bit to the identity politics point, in the sense that there is a distinction between an identity that you can't help and an identity that you choose. There should be a difference between me being the color of my skin. I can't help it. Everyone will view me as a minority, whether or not I want to be viewed that way, or whether or not I identify that way. It doesn't matter. I can see myself, I can myself identify as a white person, but you know, and harkening back to Aryan ancestors of South Asians or whatever have you, right? It doesn't matter, because people will see my dark skin and they will view me a certain way.
You're going to offend the Persian guy here, because
well, there are certain things that I can't help, right? I can't help being a biological female. Yeah. And I can't help being the color of the skin that I am. So there are certain things you can't help, and those aspects of your identity should be considered different than aspects that you choose. And Islam is something that you choose, and this is what pisses me off when people racialize racialize Muslims. And you know, you see in the Women's March where there's a white woman, and then there's a black woman, and there's a Latina woman, and there's a Muslim. And I'm saying, well, one of those was a choice. One of those was true, but it's not.
I have to say this, and this is for Omar Isam, if you're listening, that I have a chapter in my book called A Tale of Two Identities that talks exactly about this. And it talks about inborn identities and acquired identities. And this is something that a lot of people have written about before. And you know, the whole thing that if you're taking pride in an identity that you didn't work for, that you were just born into, like brown skin or whatever nationality you are, you know, that kind of thing, then you're that's the kind of stuff that starts wars. That's the kind of stuff that leads to genocides historically. Well, on the other hand, if you're taking pride or in an identity that you chose, like even whether it's parenting, whether it's your profession, whether it's the activism or that you chose, that is a completely different thing. And that's why I kind of disagree with Sam on the atheist label. I think that's to some extent okay, even though it's kind of borderline.
I mean, the point I was making, I understand that being gay and being atheist, one of them is a choice and one of them is not. But the similarity that I was pointing is that gays don't have anything in common other than being gay. They have many different opinions. And I think atheists also they understand, especially once they join the community, they notice that there's a whole bunch of them that they disagree with. There's a lot of opinions that some of them find ridiculous that other atheists hold. But what I think most of them could agree on is the fact that they shouldn't be treated as inferior for being atheists. That is enough for us to get together and build a movement out of it. And I think the disagreements are helpful. The fact that once we introduce them to each other, these disagreements and these internal fights between atheists and or ex-Muslims is helpful, because it reduces the tribalistic nature. Because a lot of atheists before, they sometimes are like, oh, I thought atheists were supposed to be more logical or more supposed to be educated or smart. Well, like, no, good thing you now are, you know, good thing you joined the atheist movement, and now you can see that that's not true. There's many dumb asshole atheists, racist atheists, or some people with good opinions but not the same as yours. This introducing them to other ex-Muslims or atheists helps reduce that tribal attitude. But at the same time, even if we disagree with each other, we can get together, and every ex-Muslim, I think, I don't know how could they disagree with this, but I think ex-Muslims could agree on this one fact that ex-Muslims shouldn't be treated as less than other people?
Well, here's the difference, because I think the split isn't that we disagree on that one point. The difference is that there are disagreements onto what policies we should take, what actions we should take from here on out to fix this original problem, right? So lefty ex-Muslims might think that, okay, the most important thing right now is to prevent the rise of the right. And whatever we can do, any tactic we can take is worth taking because we perceive it as something that will bring down the right. And I think the opposite might be said of people who take the right wing view. So I don't think
what would you respond to that opinion with someone with that opinion? What are your views on that?
What are my views on that particular opinion? The opinion that anything is worth taking down the right. Well, this is interesting because I don't think the ex-Muslim issues are singular in this respect, in that there have been ways that the left has been kind of playing denial in terms of reality and in terms of what science says and what we know for sure, for the sake of not giving the right wing any ammunition. And this is just recently, yesterday and the day before, there's just been this hoopla of Steven Pinker with this speech that he gave at Harvard, ridiculous. Which, by the way, I thought was wonderful. Like, I thought what he had to say, I disagree. I agree with every bit of it. But there was just ridiculous. I simply do not understand how the people who disagree with him can justify their belief, because
I'm sorry. What I was gonna what he was saying was actually he was talking about why the alt-right and the far right are wrong, how their knowledge is selective, and they selectively take these truths, and then they don't come up with the right conclusions, and how the people on the left have an opportunity to do that correctly, but they don't, because they just shut it out. And
right.
Both sides missed that. I don't think either side got it.
Yeah, right. No, and I guess to give context to the people who are listening to this who might not have heard of it, yeah, that's what he was saying. That's what he was saying, was that there are certain people who otherwise are intelligent and otherwise are reasonable seeming people who find out something that the left it seems to them that the left has been keeping from them, and then when they see that one fact, they lose credibility. They don't feel like they can trust the left that hasn't been truthful to them, and they start paying attention more to the right wing, who has acknowledged that this inconvenient fact, this fact, whatever it is, exists. What is interesting about the response to that video is that people have taken offense at him even acknowledging that this pattern exists, that even acknowledging that that people see these realities and are so disturbed by the fact that they might have never heard this fact before, that it might lead them astray, and that the left really doesn't provide a lot of answers, that I might lead them to adopting alt-right criticisms. It's just so amazing to me that people find problems with him even articulating that this phenomenon might exist. To truly say that he's wrong about this, you have to prove that this phenomenon doesn't exist, or something within his logic doesn't make any sense. But again, what they find problem with is that he is articulating those facts, the exact point that he had, which is left doesn't want to articulate these facts because of that they're inconvenient to the overall narrative, and they don't want to explain, they don't want to contextualize these facts. That was his whole point. And people are still finding fault with him, even describing this phenomenon to begin with. And I can't imagine how they think that this is going to help the left wing. I honestly see this as being incredibly toxic and incredibly destructive to progressive politics.
Yeah. Actually, when it comes to Islam, this is something we observe a lot, because a lot of people from the left are not told the things that are mentioned in the Quran, for example, or the truth about Islam. And the right, unfortunately, a lot of people from the alt-right also are know the things in the Quran, and they're well prepared, and they come in, and when they come and they sound more knowledgeable, right? They know the verses. Some of them memorize parts of the Quran. I'm like white people that these are. I'm not talking about the good people on the right. I'm talking about actual bigots that really know their Quran, and these people come and say, "Oh, Islam is peaceful. There's no such thing in Islam," and they come and they have verses memorized. And when you are blocking the left from the truth statements, you're making the alt-right seem more knowledgeable and more equipped with science and fact and actually understanding of religion. And we have a problem with some of their conclusions, but you know, the fact is that they are making more truth claims than the left is, and which is, yeah, I mean, we observe this, but this is the thing, is that the problem with this is that when the alt, not the right, but the alt-right, and keep saying these statements, and it sounds like a lot like the stuff that we are saying against Islam, a lot of people look at it and they say, well, you guys really sound like each other, right? And recently, especially, a lot of people are saying that ex-Muslims are joining, or too close to the right, or are basically helping the alt-right, and they're being used by the alt-right. What would you respond to people that make such claims?
The fault of the person who if there is a fault that lies here at all, it does not lie on the person who spoke the truth. You know, who especially when it comes to ex-Muslims, when you talk about the injustice that is done to us and point to the justifications of that injustice. The fault does not lie with us that someone was able to use it to further a harmful ideology. The fault lies with the opposition of those bigots, who are unable to grapple with our reality, who are unable to grapple with the injustice being done with us, and you know, pull this into their overall ideology and make some sort of sense with it. They were unable to do that. The failure is the failure of the left. It is not the failure of ex-Muslims who are talking about, well, here's what's being done to us. Here's how it's justified. Here are the verses of the Quran. We are people who are telling the truth of things as they are and as we experience them. The fault is someone uses us to push their own agenda. That's not our fault. The fault is well, theirs, to use you know, reality and twist it in a way that it becomes something horrific and something nasty and something that those of us who said those facts to begin with would disagree with. But the fault also lies in their opposition, who deny the reality. But
I had to. What about I guess another aspect of this would be the credibility question. So, like, I'm on a highway, I'm driving perfectly, I'm following all the rules, I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to, and then some crazy driver comes and hits me. Right now, I'd be like, it totally wasn't my fault. I had nothing to do with it, but I do have whiplash, and now, you know, I do have to take time off. I have to pay for car repairs or whatever. So, one of the questions is that does this when the work that we do, and you know, Armin and I have discussed this before as well, is that the stuff that we do is the fact that a lot of people on the far right and so on, and the Trump crowd are embracing us, embracing what we're saying. Is our credibility taking a hit? And if so, what do we do to counter it?
Credibility to whom?
The credit, like the kind of things that, for example, you know, what we do is we sit here, we criticize Islam, we talk about that. And so a lot of times, you know, I will get support that I don't necessarily want from people who just want all Muslims kicked out of the country or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, and then, you know, other people say, well, you know, you're saying exactly what that alt-right guy was saying, so I don't want to listen to any of you. So when that kind of thing happens, does that harm what we want to do if we are being lumped, if there's a perception that we are being lumped with them, which, I mean, none of us are. The vast majority of people I know in the ex-Muslim community are completely consistent when it comes to this, and they despise that kind of support.
Right.
But we do get lumped in together. So from a public perception point of view, if we are to have any credibility and say what we're saying, is there a way to counter it?
Well, here's my kind of a pessimistic view lately that I've taken on when it comes to this, which
Bring
is
it
that which is that it is a terrible reality that ex-Muslims are not convenient for both the left or the right. Neither of them will find us very useful. The best we can hope for is to, tweet enough things about, being anti-Trump or anti-right-wing that some of those right-wing people will just fall off, shake them off the best we can. It's the best we can hope for. We can hope for being inconvenient to them too. We can't. What we're not doing is convincing the right or convincing the left to become any more friendly to us. They view us an inconvenient, and we can try and remind the right that we are actually inconvenient to them as well. This puts us in a.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, this puts us in a terrible predicament in the sense that who can we count on to actually to actually take the actions we want them to take, to actually understand the world as we see it, and to take us seriously, and to understand the whole of our criticism, not just the aspect of it that they find convenient.
The answer is Muslims. The answer is because a lot of I'm not talking about liberal Muslim, conservative mainstream Muslims that care about truth claims, they take us seriously.
Yep.
Because they understand that the gravity of what we're talking about. So that's why I'm thinking
that's the next step. You're right.
Yeah, but I'm not unhappy with the bigots followers that I get or the far left followers that I get, because if we see ISIS people leave Islam, and if ISIS people leave Islam, I mean, I noticed at least some of the people that have been retweeting a lot of my tweets or following me and commenting, I've noticed even from some of the far right people, some of them, their attitude towards things have changed. Like they joined on the bandwagon of being anti-Muslim, anti-Islam, and now they are changing. I don't know if they're pretending or if it's real, but they're saying like, no, I'm not anti-Muslim, I'm just anti-Islam. I think that's a good thing. I see some of them changing the way they talk. So I think maybe we might have an influence on some people on the alt-right, and also a lot of people on the regressive left. I've noticed a lot of my friends used to be like, oh, I used to be I'm an ex-social justice warrior. I keep hearing that more often. So I mean,
I hear that at every talk that I've ever done. There's always been somebody who's come up and said, okay, I used to be a regressive leftist and now I think differently.
Yeah, I mean, even Nazi, ex-Nazis. We have ex-Nazis, right? Lots of ex-Nazis. So nobody, I think, we shouldn't be like, oh, I'm not happy with these followers that I'm getting. No, get them, try to convince them of a different way of looking at things. But that was just me ranting. But my question though is that people will say, people on the left deny reality, but then the response to that is that this is not you're ex-Muslim of North America. You're not ex-Muslim of Iran. You're not ex-Muslims of Pakistan. You're not ex-Muslim of Bangladesh or Saudi Arabia. This is not your reality. This is a reality of ex-Muslims in other places. In this political climate in the West, we have the rise of the alt-right. We have neo-Nazis coming back. We have the era of Trump. You have to take
civil rights.
You have to take this political climate into account and adjust your tone accordingly. That's what would you respond to that?
Well, I think there's so much to be said about that, and about how people who is first of all the right authority to judge the right tone to take in this scenario, because that's what I want to know, because everybody thinks that they have it exactly the right way and they're taking exactly the right tone. What I've seen is distinctions between activists, not necessarily in how right-wing or left-wing they are, but how much tolerance they give to people who don't see things exactly the same way as they do, right? So I've noticed people on both the right and the left where you're one step away from they are and you're too far. You're too far just by being that little microscopic step away from where they happen to be. And I've seen people both on the right and the left who are very tolerant of people who are truly far away from them politically. And I think there's something to be said about that mindset, which is to say that it acknowledges that I may believe whatever I believe strong enough that I will speak about it, that I will share it, that I will advocate for it. But I acknowledge that even I am fallible, that even I am fallible enough that I will not condemn a fellow, a person who I deem to be otherwise honest, based on disagreements, because it may be the fact that I am wrong. And there's something to be said about humility in when we're discussing who to condemn as being too far right or too far left to begin with, because I have a good amount of doubt. I hope, and I feel strongly enough about my opinions that I will champion them, that I will speak about them, that I will share them in my videos, and I will talk about them in podcasts, and I will tweet about whatever I feel. But do I feel strong enough to say that, well, Ali, you're not doing it exactly the same way I'm doing it, so fuck you, and how dare you? And obviously this means that you're deranged SJW or deranged. I mean, I think there was something you said about Oprah.
God,
like the Oprah thing, like recently you were like,
I'm the only one who thinks that. I'm the only one who.
Well, so here's I could.
That's a whole different podcast.
So here's the thing. Maybe you're right.
Here's the thing.
Okay, so there's this idea that Oprah should run for president for 2020, and there's people that are disagreeing and so on there for a variety of reasons, good reasons and bad reasons. And I've seen, I saw Ali that you tweeted like, "Yay, Oprah 2020," and I was like,
"Oh, I have a Facebook post that I will send you after this."
Okay.
I wrote an entire thing of. So my reason for that is actually a very cynical one. And it has to do with the fact that I actually believe that I think Trump is going to win in 2020. And I think the only kind of person who can beat him is someone who knows what an audience wants and gives it to them, because he is incredibly good at that. But I won't elaborate on that too much right now. I'll send you the Facebook post.
Sure. But let's say I see what you have to say at the face of it, and I just say, fuck that guy. There's a way that I could be interacting with you that would be truly toxic to the atmosphere and to the dialogue as a whole. But part of me not condemning you directly, or you not condemning me, just on the face of that disagreement, is that both of us have like a certain sense of, okay, well, I feel strong enough that I'll stand for this, for my belief, but I understand that I myself am an individual with emotions, that I have an ego that operates, and I would like to be, perfectly rational all the time, but that it's there. And this leads me, this understanding of my own humanity, means that I must forgive others when I feel like they're crossing the line too far in one direction or in the other, because in fact it may be that it is me who has crossed the line too far in one direction.
But my response to them would be that the truth is not local. The truth is the truth, whether you're in Pakistan or in Saudi Arabia or in the United States. And Sarah, I think you probably have a global audience, right? I mean,
no, I have a pretty global audience. And well, actually, Armin, I didn't answer that one question that you said, which who are you as North Americans to not care? But I think with ex-Muslims in particular, because of how immigrant of an audience we are, it's kind of a silly thing to say, because almost all of us have tons of ties back home, if not, just if we're not recent immigrants, then we're people who have like close relatives that are back home, and we care about the reality of the Muslim world. It's not as if we like left and like cut ties altogether. Right. So that would be my response to that. Like from that perspective, it doesn't make sense.
And the number one country when it comes to the followers of Atheist Republic is Pakistan. Right. So I know that even though you're ex-Muslims of North America, I keep seeing your contents and videos from people that are not in North America, that are in Islamic countries. I mean, the fact when they say we have to take the political climate into consideration, they're being very narrow-minded. They're focusing on their own neighborhood. They're forgetting the community. They're forgetting people in Yemen. They're forgetting people in Bangladesh. Yeah, exactly.
It is. It's actually America-centric. And I've told people this. They're like, "What about the political climate?" I'm like, "Well, there is a global political climate in 52 countries that is really brutal as well." And I'm not saying that we shouldn't talk about what we have here. I mean, we have to be careful of it, but there's also everything out there, and that those people haven't. We can't abandon people like Raif Badawi or all the Bangladeshi bloggers just because this stuff. At least over here, we have a set of checks and balances, right? So, so Sarah, I think we're kind of running out of time. So thank you for being generous with it. But I wanted to say two things. One is I wanted to kind of go back to what we were saying bring in an analogy for the whole Steven Pinker controversy. Is that Hitler and the Nazis based a lot of their conclusions on Darwinism and on evolution. So they use evolution as a basis to justify what they wanted to do. Now, if people on the left, or even people who are opposing them, not necessarily people on the left, but people who are opposing them, had just come up and denied evolution altogether and said that, this is crap, don't even talk about it, that would have been a lot more people would have joined the Nazis. You would have had a lot of scientists, saying, well, at least they may not have joined the Nazis. That's an overstatement, but they would have been split. It would have been much, much harder to defeat them. And I think that's kind of a historical analog that people can keep in mind whenever they're looking at that whole controversy.
Yeah, I made a video about that. People are saying what you're saying, even if it's true, is too close to what the Nazis are saying. I basically said, are you going to stop teaching evolution? Because that also sounds very close.
Exactly. Yeah,
they use that for their when they were gassing the Jews, they used evolution as their excuse. So should we ban teaching evolution in schools?
Exactly. They had that basic fact right. They selectively looked at it and came up with the wrong conclusions. But anyway, last question for you, Sarah. When are you going to start running for office?
Oh well, I was born in Pakistan, so that means that I'm not.
Well, you can't be president, but Arnold
I can't be president. I mean,
was
what else?
Governor of California. I mean, there's Congress. There's a Senate. There's governorship. There's all kinds of things.
I think what you've said because I think we just you two right there have touched on such an important point, which is that.
Yeah. But we are going to come back to this afterwards. I just want to say. But go ahead.
Yeah, which is that where is that reality, and as it is, might not necessarily aid our values and the way that we see society necessarily, but that doesn't actually take away from the importance of those values. So we recognize that that all human beings don't have the same level of intellect. We understand that. We recognize that intuitively, and we actually know that statistically now. But we still feel like each individual has dignity, and we still feel that as a whole in a society, it's beneficial for us to view us all individually and to give us all the same sort of chances, and to allow us all the same sorts of privileges and rights. And we see that, and we see the benefits of that. And it's not a difficult argument to make, unless it's something that you're not actually, unless it's something that you don't actually believe. And this is what frightens me about this kind of discourse, which is that it feels like the people that are avoiding reality because of where it might lead themselves are kind of acknowledging that, well, if I understand the reasons why someone might go in this horrible, like, right-wing bigoted way. I understand it. They're actually acknowledging that they themselves may be moved by that reasoning, if you were to acknowledge reality. But the way that we've seen history progress is that we've seen that pretending like reality isn't reality has never worked. It has never worked, because reality always comes back to haunt you. We always get better and better at measuring it, and we get better and better at acknowledging it. If we don't want acknowledging it, okay, the Chinese will. Right? Like the Indians will, someone will, they'll talk about it, and they'll bring it out into the public sphere, whether we like it or not. So we might as well be the ones to say, well, okay, these facts exist, but none of that changes the values that we ascribe to, right? It might be the case that maybe Muslims are committing a disproportionate amount of terrorist attacks. And I'm just saying this. I don't I think.
Well, I mean, yeah, just that 8-minute clip of Steven Pinker. Make sure you see the 8-minute clip. Anybody who's listening to it, and make sure you read the second half, because what he talks about is not just accepting these facts and recognizing them, but how to put them in context, and that is a responsibility of rational thinkers, and that's something that a lot of people on the far right and alt-right are using these for their narrative or not doing. And that is an opportunity that we're all missing out on. And we can actually have a more meaningful discourse. We can even correct the course. But, when you're shouting out, oh, bigot and, racist and stuff all the time. And this is a little weird to say because there are actual real bigots and racists out there right now. I mean, we're watching there's a resurgence of that, like not like I haven't seen recently, but it's not an argument.
Right. It's
someone
not
makes
an
a good argument. It's a substitute for an argument.
It helps discourse. It truly, I think what you said right there, which is it makes the conversation more meaningful. I think that's absolutely true because it helps us understand, well, what is it? Why do we give citizenship this kind of dignity that we give it, and why do we value human rights the way that we value them? Is it because necessarily all of us are capable of the exact same things in life? Maybe not, but that's not why we value it. And that's not why this is important. And I think it can lead to a much more nuanced discussion, a much more meaningful discussion, a much more even what I would consider, progressive discussion, something that actually does put human dignity first and individualism first and understands the complexity of all these issues. We can have that discussion, and it would be so wonderful to participate in. But unfortunately, even if you just bring up a fact that other people find inconvenient, that disqualifies you from the discussion altogether, or paints you as somebody who's too far right or too far left or whatever it is.
Let's hope we can move on from that. And Sarah, thank you. I wanted to say on a serious note, I do think that we are at the position where there are many of us. I think that running for office, especially here, seriously, I think that's a good idea for people like yourself and a lot of other people that I can think of now, and because that is really one way to get out there and start something that's more grassroots and take it to the next level. Tell us your Twitter, your website. Where can people find you? Where can they find the videos? How can they get involved in the tour?
So my Twitter is Sarah the Haider. It's based on like what everyone said to me in middle school, because the name is actually Heather, right? That's the name. But the way with English speaking people see it is a hater.
Yeah.
Like, you're such a hater. So it was like me as the hater. So I adopted it. And
I
now
knew
it's
someone called Batul, and guess what happened?
Right. I have some cousins who have that unfortunate name.
What does Heather mean?
Lion.
Oh wow.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. It means lion. It was a nickname given to Imam Ali.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. That's why it's such a Shia. That's why it's such a Shia name.
Oh wait, I think I know. I should know this. All right, never mind. It's Haider Ali. Okay,
It's
yeah.
a very
Mullah,
Shia
Heather
name.
Mullah, Ali Mullah, Heather Mullah. You haven't heard that?
Yeah.
Or you don't have that?
Haider Ali. I think I've heard.
Yeah, it's Ali's nickname. That's what it is.
Ali Haider. Oh yeah, I think I've heard something. Yeah. Okay.
Armin, you're a fake Shia.
Yeah.
You're a fake ex-Shia too.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, so that's how I have that. A lot of Shias get upset about me having the name. How dare you? But okay.
Yeah.
So it's Sarah the Haider. That's my Twitter handle. But if you want to know more about ex-Muslims in North America, of which I work with ex-Muslims in North America, we have the website exmna.org. We have a YouTube channel, and we have a lot of videos on there that are mentioned here from the Life Beyond Faith series and from the Normalizing Dissent tour, of which many of us have taken part, and many more will take part. And the idea is just to uplift ex-Muslims altogether. I think we've had a lot of interesting discussions there already. Armin was already a part of some of the ones, and I'm sure Ali will be soon in the future. We've had a few, we've had some difficulties with bureaucracy, but so far so good. So please check those out.
Go watch the last one with me, Muhammad and Imtiaz. There was at the 40-minute mark. There was security had to come in. It was pretty crazy. Yeah, I saw that. That was outrageous. What was going on?
What did you do, Armin?
Go watch it. I'm not gonna tell.
I thought you were awesome in it, Armin. I thought you were. I don't know how you can do that, because I can't manage that kind of like Like I can't do that. I can't do it in the same.
I love it. He's so firebrand. He's like, it's really refreshing.
I'm gonna go take the part that Sarah just said I was awesome in it. I'm gonna just trim that part out, and I'm gonna put it on repeat on my own YouTube channel.
Right, and I want to.
That was the highlight of this episode.
I know, Sarah, you're a guest, but I also want to tell the listeners to go and follow Armin Navabi, because right now there are Iranian protests going on. Armin has been absolutely at the forefront of these. I mean, there are the major journalists across the world who have been following him, seeing his posts. He's reporting videos and all kinds of things that are happening in Iran right now. So
actually, right now is more important
really
than before. Even if you don't follow me, please, if you find any news about this, please post it no matter where you get it, because it's more important right now than when the protests were happening, because the news is not interested in the aftermath, and the government is waiting for the media to stop talking about it, to start deciding what they're going to do to the prisoners. There's 3,700 prisoners right now, and once the media starts losing attention, the fact that the eyes are not there anymore, it could be big consequences for people that they have captured during the protest. So the protests that have died down, now we're looking at what the government's reaction is going to be to the people that they have arrested, and this paying attention to what's happening there right now is right now more important than when the protests were happening, because people's lives depend on how much media scrutiny this gets.
And we had a more extensive discussion on that. If you're listening to this, the previous episode, we're going to put out that Armin and I talked about it at length. Anyway, Sarah, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
It was great having you on. We'd love to have you on again at some point too.
Thank you for having me. This is fun.
Yeah, I'm going to stop the broadcast, but stay on so that we make sure the audio and everything is going. Anyways, thank you for people in the live chat, Obaid, and the other people that they don't have their real names on. But thank you everybody for the questions and the support. And thank you so much for Sarah for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you.